Pa 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 pam. Pa-da-da-da-dum. Pa-da-da-da-dum. It's time. It's finally time. The reckoning has come. Welcome back, fellow listener. It's at last we are here with the end of the first novel ever written, Fifth Dungeons and Dragons novel ever written by Norton about the world of Grey Oak. The first ever, and we are here to end it. The last time, our 7 heroes, the swordsman Milo Yegon, the warboar berserker Nail fainted with his companion Afrita, a pseudo-dragon, a rogue elf Ingrid, a cleric, a human cleric, Divdian, a human swords maiden Iveli, a bard, a human bard Wymark, and the lizardman Gult travel across the Sea of Dust to find a bizarre location, a swamp inside the Sea of Dust. As the name said, it is a wasteland, and the swamp inside the wasteland is a bit strange. Inside this, they begin their journey inside this Quag, thanks to the knowledge of one of their own, Gult the Lizardman, and then they found the Quag Heart. And that is the title of the 17th chapter, Quag Heart. And let's begin with it. A bit. Okay. Imprisoned by the walls of mist, surrounded by the clouds of insects, which even the forays of Afrita did nothing to drive away, they were caught in a pocket of time that they could not measure. They only knew that the crude raft on which they balanced continued to move. And since Gult controlled that journey, they guessed that the lizardmen must also know their goal. I am wondering, Iveli said, if we have already been noted and there are those awaiting us. She raised her head, propping herself up on her extended arms, and looked directly at Milo. Such ones as this shape changer you have already fronted, swordsman. She's no shape changer, Nail cut in. An illusionist needs to reach into the mind to spin such webs, and another can break them. When he realized that there are only fences, he appeared aggrieved that Iveli equated the stranger with him in such a fashion. I am wondering why she came to us. Wymark shook his head vigorously to try and discourage the attentions of a flying thing nearly as long as his own middle finger. It argues that we have been discovered. Thus, we may indeed meet a welcome we shall not want. Yes, the open jaws of another dragon, commented Nail, or the sucking of a mud hole. Yet, there is something about these attempts against us. They seem to be not very carefully planned. Oh, mi si è attivata Siri. Oh. Sorry. They seem to be not very carefully planned, Wymark supplied when the berserker paused. Yes, each attempt possesses a flaw, does it not? It is, Ingrid spoke for the first time, as if orders are incomplete, or else they are not understood by servants. He rolled over on his back and held up his arm so that the bracelet was visible. How much do these control our way now? Perhaps very little. Milo gained their full attention, quickly outlined his battle with the frog things, and how then there had been no warning spin of the dice. It may be because we approached at last the place in which those came into being, that they can operate only beyond its presence, Evelyn said slowly, her hand rubbing now along her home bracelet. Then, if that is so, we are without warning, or any aid we can gain from a controlled spin. Divine finished their thought. Yet, do you feel released from the gears in any fashion? There was a moment of silence as they tested the compulsion that had brought them out of Grey Oak and to this place of water, mud, and mist. Milo strove to break loose, to decide to turn back, but that force was still strong within him. So we learned something else, the cleric pointed out. Wizardry still holds us, even though the other. This, he tapped a fingertip against the band about his wrist, does not. What are we to gather from such evidence? Aegeus is of this world, Evelyn mused aloud. The band which we cannot take from us perhaps is not. There are many kinds of magic. I know of no one, unless it be an adept, who can list them all. This foul quagmire is magic-born. What kind of magic, priest? There are many fearsome odors here. Still I have not sniffed yet the traces of chaos leaves when dark powers are summoned. Alien forces? So say the Eastaspes, Milo returned. We are slowing, Ingrid broke in. Those who tow us want no part of what lies ahead. They protest against Gil's urging. He raised to look over the edge as Milo had done. More water seeped in, and his cloak showed patches of wet. How many of these swamp dwellers can be allied for us or against us? Nail wanted to know. None answered to my war call. So the berserker, without telling them, had been trying to use one of his own talents. Who knows? Ingrid answered. None have I touched who were not life as we of this world recognize it. Though this swamp has been populated arbitrarily, in some minds I have found fading memories of living elsewhere. In the rest there is only consciousness of the here and now. A slice of country transported, with its dwellers, hazarded Divine. That is wizardry beyond my learning. Yet all things are possible. There is no boundary of knowledge. Something there. Milo picked a dark shadow out of the mist. It was fixed, not moving, toward that the raft headed, far more slowly now. Gil tells them, those who pull us, reported the elf. They protest more, but his control continues. He has agreed to release them when we touch that which we see ahead. The shadow grew and became not just a dark spot in the mist, but a tumble of rocks spilling forward to form a narrow tongue. They looked upon the promise of that stability with divided minds. To the crated side, the solid look of the rock promised firm footing, a refuge from the swamp. On the other hand, firm land would also hold other dangers. Guilt crawled out of the water, climbing carefully over the side barrier. We go there! He gestured to the tongue of a rock. It loomed high above, its foot water washed and covered with green slime. The raft bumped gently against it a moment later. Push that way! Guilt stepped close, leaned over to set his taloned hands against the rogue surface of the rocks, obeying his own order to edge the unwieldy craft to the left. Only Nail, Milo, and Wymark could find room to stand beside the lizardman and add their strength to this new maneuver. The stone was wet, and their progress was hardly faster than that of the fat leech slugs that clung to the rocks and that they tried to avoid touching. Little by little they brought the raft around to the other side of that jutting point. There, there, in an indentation which made a miniature bay, they worked their way closer to some smaller stones that arose from the surface of the water like natural steps. One could only see a short distance ahead, but Nail had a method of overcoming that difficulty. Afrita took off, spiraling up, then darting into the mist at the higher level to which that stairway climbed. Milo and Gult found fingerholds to which they clung as Nail swung over, setting his feet firmly on their first stone. The berserker climbed up, out of sight, while they still held so. One by one the others passed between them to follow. Then Milo clambered over, and the lizardman was quick to follow, leaving the raft to drift away. Her fog enfolded them even more thickly. They could not see those they followed. However, the mist did not muffle a sudden shout or the sound of steel against steel. Milo, sword in hand, made the last part of that ascent in 2 bounds. Nor did he forget a quick glance once more at his wrist. The dice neither shone nor moved. It would seem the phenomenon on which they depended still did not work. Gult, moving with more supple speed than the swordsman had seen him use since their quest began, gave one leap that surpassed Miles' effort and vanished into the mist. The swordsman was not far behind. With a last spurt of effort he broke through the fog, into open space. This lay under a grey and lowering sky, to be sure, but one might see his fellows as more than just forms, moving in and out of higher range. What he did witness was Nail axe up to swing, as if the berserker had fastened on Milo himself as the enemy. Yet there was Nail further off, confronting a shambling, stone-hided troll. Illusion! Milo lifted the hand wearing the ring, half afraid that, in the atmosphere of this alien setting, it too might have ceased to possess its spell-breaking quality. But, like the geese, it still served. The Nail about to attack him changed swiftly in a nicker of an eye to a man he had seen before, the animal trader Helagret. His axe was a dagger, its upright blade discolored by a greenish stain. Milo swung at this opponent with the practiced ease of a trained infighter. His sword met that dagger harm, but did not shear deeply, for the edge found the resistance of a Milo shirt beneath the other's travel-stained jerkin. But the force of the blow, delivered so skillfully, sent the dagger spinning from the other's hand, rendering him off balance. Milo tossed the sword to his other hand, caught it by the blade, and delivered with the heavy hilt a trick stroke he had learned through long and painful effort. As the pommel thudded home on the side of Elagret's head, the man's eyes rolled up. Without a cry, he slumped to the rock. His huddled body lay now in the way of Nail, retreating from the lunges of the troll, for no matter how skillfully the berserker wrought with his bone-shattering axe strokes, none of them appeared to land where he had aimed them. No! Milo threw up his ring hand, dodging past Nail, stopping just in time to escape one of the berserker's wider swings, and touched the troll. There was again that flicker of dying illusion. What Nail faced now was not an 8-foot monster toward the head and neck of which he had aimed his attack, but rather a man, human as Milo, and well under the berserker's own towering inches. Nice show! The thief adventurer, his lips drawn into a snarl, dove forward, stretching forth both hands as the troll had earlier threatened Nail with 6-inch talons. Strapped to his digits were the wicked weapons of the soundless assassin, keen knives projecting beyond his own nails. The tips of 2 were stained, and Milo guessed that the lightest scratch from one would bring a painful death. The axe arose and fell as Niall voiced a shrill squeal of boar anger. There was no male here to stop the stroke. Naisho screaming stumbled. The hands with their knives were on the ground. From the stumps of his wrist spouted blood. Again Niall struck. The teeth, his head beaten in, fell, the hands hidden beneath his twitching body. Milo leaped over that body, heading for the rest of the skirmish. Divdine crushed by a spur of rock, his belt knife drawn, but his other hand cradled his bats, and he chanted, intent on keeping his attacker from him, while he wrote some spell of his own calling. That attacker slunk, belly to the ground, a scaled thing that might well have issued from the quagmire. Its body was encased in a shell, but head, swaying back and forth, was that of a serpent, and the eyes staring fixedly at the priest were evilly wise. Milo brought the ring against his shell. This time there was no change. He swung up his sword, only to be elbowed aside by Niall. His axe flashed up, then down, with an executioner's precision, to behead the monster. Through the air spun viscous yellow stuff that the creature had spat at the crouching cleric, just before its head bounced to the rock. A few drops fell on the edge of Divdine's robe. A wisp of smoke arose and the cloth showed a ragged hole. "Aware that!" Niall cried. He had turned and was already on the move. Wymark and Engrig stood back to back, alert to those who circled them. A little apart, the druid Carivols paced around and around the beleaguered two and their enemies. The latter were black imps, spears in hand, their cold red eyes ever upon those they teased and tormented, flashing in to deliver some prick with their spears. To Milo's surprise, neither the elf nor the bard strove to defend himself with a sword, though trickles of blood ran down their legs unprotected by mail. Niall roared and leaped forward, swinging his axe at the prancing demons. The steel head passed through the bodies. He strove to smash as it might have thrown wisp of smoke. Milo, seeing that, understood the strange passiveness of the two in that circle. Carlvolz did not look at either Milo or the berserker. His body was tense, strain visible on his face. The swordsman guessed that, though the magic worker had the ability to summon these creatures from whatever other plane they knew as home and keep them tormenting the two they encircled, it was a dire energy drain for him to hold the spell in force. None of the demons turned to attack either Niall or Milo. Thus there was clearly a limit to what the druid could order them to do. Yet they were well able to keep up the threat against both elf and bard, and their spear attacks were growing stronger. The circle narrower. "Stand aside!" Divdine shouldered by Milo. The cleric whirled his string of prayer bats as if it were a scourge he could lay across an imp's back and rump. Even so, did he aim it at the nearest. Milo was content to leave this skirmish to the two priests and what they could summon. Now he looked for Yveli, to find two battlemates looked together in combat. So much was one girl the image of the other that, as he crossed the rock to where swords met sword, shield was raised against blade. The swordsman could not say which of the two was she, with whom he had marched out of Grey Oak. There was a stir in the rocks beyond. From the shadow there ran a man. He carried a mace in both hands and ranged himself behind the circling Yvelis, striving to use his weapon on one. Yet it would seem that he himself was not sure which was which, and that he hesitated to attack for that reason. Milo bore down on the newcomer, though the stranger stood near as tall as the swordsman. His face under the plain helm he wore had the features of an orc, and his lips were tightly drawn so that his fang-like teeth were visible between. Milo, sword upraised, was upon him before the other realized it. Then he whirled about with a sidewise swing of the mace, aimed at Milo's thigh. There was enough force in that blow the swordsman took to break a hip. Only narrowly was he able to avoid being hit. The ring on his thumb did not gleam, so this fighter was no illusion. Swords could make little impression as this enemy wore a heavy mail shirt, reinforced breast and back with plates of dingy and rust-reddened metal. For all his what thickness of body, the orc was a cunning fighter and a stubborn one. Jinx. But no orc, no matter how powerful or skillful, could in turn face what came at him now from another angle, while his attention was fixed on Milo. Sorry, I have the cat. This was no axe-swinging berserker, but the werebore, near as tall as the orc, at the massive shoulder, grunting and squealing in a rage that only the death of an enemy might assuage. Milo leaped quickly to one side, lest the animal in battle madness turn on him also, as had been known to happen when friend and foe were pinned in narrow compass. He could leave the orc to the were. There remained Evely, locked in combat with what appeared to be herself. Once more he turned to the battling woman. One of them had forced the other back to stand with her shoulder against a barrier Milo saw clearly for the first time, a wall looming from more mist. He threw out his arm to touch the one who had forced her opponent into that position. There was no flare of the ring. Now Milo's sword swept up between the women. Both their blades knocked awry by that stroke they had not foreseen. "Have done!" he spoke to Evely. This witch may answer what we need to know." For a moment it seemed that the battle-maid would not heed him. He could see little of her face below the helm. Though her head swung a fraction in his direction, he knew she was still watchful. The other Evely took that chance to push forward from the wall and stab at him with her blade, but he hooked the maw easily on the flat side of his sword, his strength bearing down her arm. She drove her shield straight at him, and he lashed out with his foot, catching her leg with a blow made the crueler by his iron-enforced boot. Screaming, she staggered back, her shoulder hitting the wall. As she slid down along its surface, Milo stopped to touch her with the ring. Her helmet had been scraped off in her fall, showing tight braids of hair beneath it. They were no longer red-brown, rather much darker, and it was not Evely's sun-browned features now that were completely visible. The nose was thinner, higher in the bridge, the face narrowed to a chin so pointed it was grotesque. Her mouth was a vivid scarlet, and her full lips twisted as she spat at him, stabbing upward with her sword. Evely kicked this time, her toe connecting expertly with the illusionist's wrist. The sword dropped from fingers suddenly nerveless. Then the fallen woman screeched out words that might have been a curse or a spell, but if it were the latter, she never got to finish it, as deftly as Milo had done in his own battle. Evely reversed her sword and brought the hilt down on the black head. The illusionist crumpled to lie still. Evely smiled grimly. "Swordsman," she said, not looking at Milo, rather bending over the illusionist while she unbuckled the other sword's belt to bind her arms tightly to her body. "No longer will I think that you were telling some tavern miner's tale when you said that you had met me in the dust dunes by moonlight." She went down on one knee, tearing off a strip from the cloak she had dropped earlier. She thrust a wad of the stout cloth into the illusionist's mouth, making fast the gag with another strip. "Now she will throw no more spaff or enough or any other." "Aye. Now she will throw no more spell or any throw no more spell or evil, or any other nature. Evilise sat back on her heels, her satisfaction easy to read. Yes, she continued, after a moment's survey of her captive. Not only can this one appear before me worrying my face, but look you, she has bad some study of the rest of me, even the dance upon my shield and the shifting of dust. Swordsman, I would say that we have been watched carefully and long, probably by magic means. Evilise spoke the truth. What the unconscious girl before them wore was an exact duplication of her own apparel. When the illusionist had played her tricks upon him in the night, then her armor had also been an illusion, vanishing when he broke the spell, but this time the clothing was real. Look into her eyes, if indeed she opens them soon, the battle-maid continued. It is by sight, your sight linked to theirs, that such huddle a brain. Perhaps her tone turned contemptuous as she arose. This one thought to bedazzle me, so by a mirror image, that I could be easily taken. She speedily discovered that such tricks could not bemuse me. And now now she swung around, Milo turning with her. It will appear we have all given good account of ourselves. But where is guilt? Boar stood, 4 feet planted on the body of the orc, a rugged piece of mail dangling from one yellowish tusk. Wymark and Ingrid were no longer surrounded by any encircling of dancing imps. Instead, they backed Divdine, who swung his badge still as he might a whip advancing on the black druid, who covered, dodged, and tried to escape, yet seemingly could not really flee. The prayer beds might be part of a net to engulf him, as well as a scourge to keep him from calling on his own dark powers. For to do that, any worker of magic needed quiet and a matter of time to summon aids from another plane, and Carivols was allowed neither. Evilise was right. There was no sign of the lizardman. He had been with Milo when they had claimed to this spot, or at least the swordsman had thought so. Yet, now Milo could not recall having seen Guilt since he himself had plunged into battle. He cupped his hands about his mouth and called, "Oh, Guilt!" No answer, nothing moved, save that Nail performed once again his eye-wrenching feat of shape-changing. "Guilt!" Guilt! Milo called again. A fruit darted down from the mist above them, circled Niall's head, to alight as usual on his shoulder. Of the lizardman there was neither any sign nor hint of what might have become of him. A silence had fallen as Divdine got close enough to his quarry to draw the bats across his shoulder. The black druid clapped both hands over his mouth and fell to his knees, his body convulsed by a series of great shuders. Stepping back, the cleric spoke. "By the grace of him who orders the winds and the season, this one is now our meat for a space. Do you unbind him, so that he may not lay hand to any amulet or tool he might have about him. Take also that pouch he wears upon his belt. Do not open it, for what it may contain is for his hand alone. Rather take it, and hurl it away, into the swamp, if you will. In so much can we disarm him. As for Guilt, he came to join Milo and Evilise. It might be well that we see him. Also be prepared for what else can face us." The druid, his pouch gone, his arms pulled behind him, the wrists tightly bound, was dragged up to them by Wymark. Milo went to examine him, who had played the role of another Nail. There was a sluggish pulse, but his skull might be cracked. He could be bound and left. They had 2 conscious captives, the illusionist and the druid. Perhaps these 2 were of least use, though they were the most deadly, that since both had defenses that were not based on strength of body or weapon in hand. Over the gag, Milo saw the woman's intent gaze as he went to bring her to their council of war, but he knew that Evilise had been right in her warning. The last thing to do was to look into her eyes, or let her compelling gaze cross his. He laid her down beside the druid. The man's face worked frantically as he fought to open his lips, yet they remain close set together. I will not suggest we take them with us, Weimar spoke up. To my mind, it is a time to move fast, laying no extra burdens upon ourselves. Well enough, agreed Niall. He drew his knife. Give me room, Bard, and this I shall lay across their throats. Then we need not think of them again. No, Milo had seen plenty such blooding of captives on fields of victory. It was a custom among many of the wards, and not them alone. Better to leave only dead than to take prisoners when to guard such defeated one's purpose. Mark was right. They should not take with them this most dangerous of the enemy, but it was not in him to kill a helpless captive coldly and neatly out of hand. End of chapter 17. Last chapter, chapter 18. I hand the water out. Chapter 18, the last one. Roll the dice. They drew together at the black wall, his top veiled in the mist. With that as a guide, they went wearily forward, seeking some break in its surface. This was no natural upthrust of rock, but laid by the hand of either human or alien. The blocks were unfinished, pressed one above the other, but so cunningly set that it was solid enough without mortar. Floating wisp of mist drifted above them, sometimes curling down that wall. Milo glanced back. There the mist had closed in, dropping a curtain between them and the recent battleground. Here a pocket of clear air appeared to move with them. There was nothing to see but the black rock, with clusters of moisture bubbles gathering underfoot or the wall, while with every breath they drew that darkness invaded their lungs, tainted as it was by the effluvia of the swamplands. Ingrid went down on one knee, intent upon something on the ground. Yult has come this way, indicated a smear on the rock, some on the greyish slime growth, which spotted it leprously in places, had been crushed into a noisome pus. How can you be sure that was left by Yult? Evilly demanded. The elf did not look at her. It was Milo who coaxed the clue. Those scrap marks could only have been made by Yult's forward jutting foot claws, but why had the lizardman deserted the fight? Gone ahead. I said it, Niall broke into the swordsman's toes. To trust one of the scaled one is folly. Can you not see? It was he who brought us here, delivered us as neatly as a merchant man brings a pack of trading goods across country to a warehouse. Afrita lifted her head, hissed with the viciousness of her kind. Niall raised one hand to rest on her body between fanning wings. With his axe in the other, he went on with an agile tread surprising for his bulk. There was their gate, or door, a dark gap in the wall, waiting like the maw of some great toothless creature. There was no door or bar, only a dark through which they could see. Niall swung his axe, slicing into that blackness as if it were a living enemy. The double-headed blade flashed inward, vanished from their sight. Then the berserker pulled it back once more. Look to your wristlet! Weimar's warning was hardly needed. A growing warmth of that metal had already alerted them all. The dice spots blazed. The metal bands themselves took on a glow that fought against the drab daylight of the rocky isle. But the dice did not spin, nor could Milo, concentrating with all the power he could summon, steer them into any action. They were alive with whatever force they had, but they did not move. Powers returns to power. Divdine held out his own banded arm. Yet there is nothing here that answers to my questing. He shook his bats. Still, the Gias holds. We must go on. Wymark returned. It was true. Milo felt that too. The compulsion that had kept them moving ever southward and had sent them into the sea of dust here strengthened. Some force stood or hovered behind him, exerting rising strength to combat his will. Now all the power Istaspas had summoned to find the Gias built higher as a flame lifts when fresh oil is poured into the basin of the lamp. There could be no arguing against the wizard's will, no matter what might face them in or beyond that curtain of the dark hung across the arched opening of the wall. Without a word to each other, hooked like fish upon a line, they moved forward, while the warmth from their bracelets grew to an almost unbearable heat. Darkness closed about them, bringing a complete absence of all light. Milo took 3 strides, 4, hoping to so win into a place where sight and hearing would once more function, for here he was blind, nor could he catch any sounds from those who shared his venture. He was isolated in the smothering dark. It was difficult to get a full breath. Toad's swamp hair had been cut off when he had taken that first stride into the total black. Trap? If so, he was fairly caught. The band on his wrist was bummy. Toad here, he could not see those flashes from the minute jams on the dice. He tried with the fingers of his left hand to free them, make them swing. It was impossible. Either the command that Istaspes had set on him sent him on and on. If this was all they could sense, how then might they combat an entity blindly? Such a defense as this on the part of the alien was more than they had expected. Milo shook his head. There was a kind of mist in his brain, slowing his thoughts, Ferrous blanking out his mind even as this outer darkness had entrapped his body. He could move freely, yes, but he was not even sure now in his state of increasing bewilderment and dizziness that he moved straight ahead. Was he wandering in circles? And in his head, a table, voices, something he clasped within his hand. A figure. Milo stowed, caught, and held that fraction of memory in triumph. He had held a figure, beautifully wrought, of a fighting man armored and helmeted, like Milo Yegon himself. Milo Yegon? He paused, enfolded in the dark. He was Martin Jefferson. He was with the beginning of panic, he staggered on, his hands going to his head as he fought to control the seesaw of memories. Milo, Martin, Milo. Absorbed in that conflict, he stumbled on, one foot before the other, no longer aware of his surroundings. Then, just as the dark had closed about them upon their entrance through the wall, so did it end. Milo blundered out into the open once again. He squinted against the light that struck at him. To his eyes this was a punishing glare, so he blinked and blinked again. Then his sight adjusted. He stood in a room of rugged stone walls and floors. There were no windows in those walls. Above his head the ceiling was the same drab black-grey, though it was crossed by heavy beams of wood. In the wall directly opposite there was the outline of a doorway. An outline only, for it had long ago been filled with smaller stones wedged tightly together to form what looked to be an impassable barrier. Before this stood Gult, facing that blocked way, his back to those who had joined him. Milo strove to move forward, nearer to the lizardman. He had taken 2 strides to bring him out of the darkness, into this place where the walls themselves gave forth an eerie glow without any benefit of lamp or torch. But he now could go no farther in spite of all his willing. His feet might have been clamping to the stone floor. "Wizardry!" Naila rumbled at his right. "One wizard sends us on, the other traps us." The berserker was twisting, trying to turn his body, manifestly attempting to loosen feet as immovable as Milo's. "No spell of this world holds us," Divine said. The cleric stood quietly, his bands coiled about his wrist, carefully looped not to touch the bracelet. On all their arms those still glowed with minute sparks of light. What do we now?" Evilly demanded. "Wait, here, like sheep in a butcher's pen." Milo moistened his lips with tongue tip. To be so entrapped sapped his resolution, and he understood the danger of such wavering. Now his voice rang out a fraction louder than he had intended. He hoped that no one of them could hear in it an inflection of uneasiness. "Who are we?" He saw all their heads turned, even that of guilt. Though the lizardman was far enough in advance that he could not really see who stood behind him. "What do you mean?" Evely began, and then hesitated. "Yes, that is so. Who are we in truth? Can any of us give an answer to that?" None replied. Perhaps within themselves they shifted memory, strove to find a common ground for the seesaw of those memories. It was Waymark who made answer. In that way lies our danger. Perhaps we have been so split now to disarm us, send us into some panic. While we stand here, comrades of the road, we must be one, not two. Milo stated. The bard was right, but could the man put aside those sharp thrusts of alien memory, be himself whole and one, untroubled by another identity? He glanced at the bracelet on his wrist. Nail had called this wizardry. The berserker was right. Could one wizardry be set against another in a last battle here? "Be those of Grey Oak!" A sudden instinct gave him that. The swordsman has made an excellent suggestion," Divdine said slowly. "Divided we will be excellent meat, perhaps helpless before the alien knowledge. Strive to be one with this world. Do not reach after that which was of another existence." Milo, he was Milo. Milo, he must be Milo. Now he strove to master that other memory, put it from him as far as possible. He was Milo Yegon, no one else. The bracelet. The swordsman fastened his gaze on it, holding out his arm so that he could see it clearly. Dice spinning, dice. No, do not look at that. Do not think of them. He fought that to drop his arm once more to his side, discovered that it was as fixed in the raised position as his feet were to the stones of the floor. Look away, at least that he could do. He forced up his chin. By an effort that made the sweat bed on his skin, he broke the intense stare of his eyes. "Well done," Divdine spoke with the firm tone of one who had fronted wizardry of many kinds and had not been defeated. Milo glanced at the others. Their arms, even that of the cleric, were held out stiff before them, but everyone had broken the momentary spell that held them in trial to the motionless dice. "This is the magic of this time and place," the cleric continued. "Milo has told us, be of Grey Oak. Let us use the weapons of Grey Oak against this alien. Perhaps that is the answer. Each of us has something of magic in us. Ingrig holds that knowledge which is of the elves, and which no human man can understand or summon. Nail puts forth the strength of the werewolf. Evely has some spells she has learned. Weimar controls the harp. Milo wears upon his hands ancient rings, of whose properties we cannot be sure. I have what I have learned, he swung his bats. I do not think Yult either lacks some power, so let us each concentrate his mind on what is ours and bears no relation to those bands set on us against our wills." His advice was logical, but Milo thought they were trusting in a weak hope. Still, the illusion, breaking a ring, had worked during their fight outside these walls. He looked at the two rings, moving his other hand out beside the one held so stiffly straight before him. Now he concentrated as Divdine had bade upon them. What other strange powers they might control, when used by one with the right talent, he had no idea. He could only hope. He pressed his two thumbs tightly together, thus the setting touched side by side. Wizards were able to move stones, rocks as heavy as those melting up these walls, with mind power alone when it was properly channeled. No, he must not let his mind stray as to what could be done by an adept. He must only think now on what might be done by Milo Yegon, swordsman. Cloudy, oval, oblong, green, blurring, forgotten map lines. He stared at them both, strove to reduce his world to the rings only, though what he groped so dimly to seize upon he could not have explained. Somewhere that word arose in his mind, repeated. It had a ring of compulsion, a beat that spread from toe to the flesh and bone. Relax, let it rise in you. What rise? Fear of the unknown tried to break loose. Resolutely Milo fought that. drove it from the forepart of his mind. In, in, in. The beat of that word ached, added to now by a strain of music, monotonous in itself, but repeating the same three notes again and again, somehow adding force to his will. In, in, in. As Milo had exiled beginning fear, so now he battled with doubt. He was no wizard, no spellmaster, whispered that doubt. There could be no real answer to the task he willed. Still, only was his weapon. In, in, in. As his word was deliberately narrowed to the rings, they grew larger, until he could see only the strange gems. Larger. Both were coming alive, not exactly glowing as had the bracelet, rather as if their importance was being made manifest to him. In. Milo moved before he was aware that that which had held his feet had loosed hold. He took one slow step, another. It was like wading through the treacherous mud of the swamp. To raise each foot required great effort. Still it could be done. His shoulder brushed against Gul's. They both stood facing the wall. On his other side he was dimly aware of Ivy coming up beside them, could hear without understanding a mutter of words she voiced. In. He took a last step. His outstretched hands, held at high level so that he could concentrate on the rings, came palm flat against the small stones that had been set to block the doorway. Beside him, Gult had also moved, his taloned hands resting beside Milo's. Concentrate. He found it difficult to hold that fierce will to be on the rings. Then the wall barrier, which had looked and felt at his first touch so immovable, began to crumble. The blocks decayed into coarse rubble, which tumbled to the flooring. A brighter light than they had yet seen streamed out. Concentrate. Milo fought to keep his toes fixed steadily on the rings and hold there. Those blocks were gone. Their outstretched hands now met no position. Milo heard a soft cry from beside him, echoed it with a sharp breath of his own. The bracelet was no longer only warm. It formed a tormenting band of fire about his arm, bringing sharp pain. However, his feet were not fixed. Aroused to sullen anger by that pain, he moved on, dimly aware that the rest of the party were fast on his heels. What they faced? Illusion? Milo could not be sure, but as he stared ahead into that brightly lighted room, his surprise was complete. Here were no stone walls, no sign of any dwelling that one might find in this world. The floor under his boots was wood, only half covered by a rug of dull green. Planted in the center of it was a table, and on the table was stacked a pile of books. Not the scrolls, stones, parchment he might expect to find in a wizard's chamber, but books that the other person deep within him recognized. One, a loose-leaf notebook, lay open, back flat on the table. Facing it was a row of small figures, standing in a scattered array on a large sheet of paper, marked off into squares by different colored lines. On the wall behind the table hung a map. Divine spoke. "This is the land we know." He gestured the map. He gestured, yeah. Milo came to the table. The figures. Once more his hand curled as if he clasped their like in protecting fingers. Not chessmen, no. Though these were playing pieces right enough. A representation of man, of alien, each beautifully fashioned with microscopic detail. He eyed them narrowly, almost sure that each of them must be one of the pieces. But that was not true. There were a druid, a dragon, others he could not be sure of without examining them closely, but no swordsman, no elf, bard, battle maiden, no guild, divine, Nail. There was no one in the room, no other entrance save the door they had opened for themselves. Still Milo had a feeling that they would not be alone long, that he who had opened that book, set out the figures, would at any moment return. Evelyn moved around the table, looking down at the paper spread there. She looked up. "I know this. Why?" There was a frown of puzzlement on her face. This is... Her mental effort was visible to any watcher as she fought to find words. This is a game. Her last word was a key to unlock the door of memory. Milo was not transported back in person, but he was in mind, in another room, not too different from this in some ways. Extreme should be there unpacking the new pieces, he held the swordsman. We are the pieces, he broke out. He swung halfway around, pointing from one of the party to the next. What can you remember now? He demanded from them. Game pieces? Divine nodded slowly. New game pieces, and I picked one up to examine it more closely. Then he made a gesture toward himself, toward the rest of them. I was in Greyhawk, and I was Divine, but how can this be? Wizardry of a sort I have no knowledge of? Was it the same with all of you? They nodded. Milo had already gone on the next question, one that perhaps none of them might be able to answer. Why? Do you not remember what Istaspe said to us? Counter-questioned the battle maid. He spoke of words tied together by bringing us here, of a desire to link two planes of existence together. Which would be a disaster, Wymark said. Each would suffer from such a... Whatever he might have had was never voiced. There came a flickering in the opposite corner of the room. Then a man stood there, as if the very air itself had provided a doorway for his entrance. An expression of complete amazement on his thin face was quickly overshadowed by another of mingled fear and anger, or so Milo read it. The swordsman made the first move. It depended once more on the reflexes of his body, as his blade cleared his scabbard and pointed toward the stranger in one clean flowing act. Evelyn moved as speedily, but in a different direction. She snatched up the open notebook from the table. Let that alone! Anger triumphed over both amazement and a trace of fear in the stranger. This is the key to your meddling, isn't it? Demanded the girl in return. These and those, she pointed to the row of figures. Are they to be your next captives? You don't know what you are doing, he snapped. Then he paused before adding, You don't belong here. A wire. His voice rose in a sharp imperative call. A wire. Where are you? You can trick me with your illusions. Illusions? Nail rumbled. Let me get my two hands on you, little man. The berserker strode forward with a purposeful stride. Then you will see what illusions can do when they are angered. The stranger backed away. You can't touch me! His tone now held a shrill note. You are not supposed to be here at all! He sounded aggrieved as well as impatient. A wire knows better than to try your tricks on me. Yveli lifted hastily through the rain-bound pages of the notebook. Suddenly she paused and called out, Wait, Nail, this is important to us all. Steadying the book in one hand, she used a finger on the other to run lightly across the page as she read. First shipment of figures on its way. We'll run periodic checks. If the formula does work, what a perfect game. So, Milo held his sword with a point aimed at the other's throat. Thus far he kept rigid control of his anger. We have been playing your game, is that it? I do not know how or why you have done this to us, but you can send us back. The stranger was shaking his head. You needn't try to threaten me. You aren't real. Don't you understand that? I'm the game master, the referee. I call the action. Ho! He raised one hand and rubbed his forehead. This is ridiculous. Why do I argue with someone who does not really exist? Because we do. Nail reached out one hand as if he would seize upon the stranger's shirt just above his heart. Inches away from the goal, his fingers brought up against an invisible barrier. The stranger paid no attention to the aborted attack. He was staring at Yveli. Don't! His voice reached a scream. He had suddenly lost control. What are you doing? Now he moved toward the table, and the girl who held the notebook in her hands, she was methodically tearing out the pages, letting them drift to the floor. No! The stranger made a grab for his possession. Even as Nail could not reach him, neither could they reach Yveli. Calmly she moved back and continued her destruction. Then the other looked. "You really can't be anyone now but yourselves," he said in a voice he once more had under control. "It's a one-way road for you." "But not for you?" Divine asked with his usual mildness. The stranger flashed a glance at him. "I'm not really here. You might term it magic in this benighted barbaric world. I project only a part of me. I have an anchor back there. You do not. You serve my purpose by being here. Do you suppose I would have left you anyway back? The more of you," he glanced at the figures on the table and away again. "We can answer to what is set in those figures, because each one holds that which will draw someone of the right temperament here, the stronger my plan will be." "Thank you for the information." Weimar reached the table to gather up the figures with a single sweep of his hand. He slammed them to the floor and stamped hard, flattening the metal into battered lumps. The stranger watched him with a sly smile. "It doesn't put an end to it, you know. There are more of these waiting. I need all to bring them through. Link them here," and then he shrugged. "I do not think you will do that." From the back of the notebook, Yveli drew a single sheet of time-browned paper. Milo caught only a glimpse of a struggle of dark lines across it. Now the stranger let out a cry. I couldn't have left that here!" Once more he made an ineffectual attempt to say what she held, but the barrier that lay between them held. Yveli backed farther away, holding out the paper to Divine. The cleric grasped it and swiftly rolled it up to be wrapped with his prayer beds. Yveli spoke to Milo. "The dice, comrade. Get the dice. It would seem he has forgotten them also." Milo longed for the table, the stranger doing the same from the other side. It was he who overbalanced the board, sent it crashing on its side, barely missing Milo's feet. Dice such as those they wore in miniature rattled among the cascade of books and papers to spin across the floor. Milo scooped up 3, so that the Ingrid and Weimar had the others. "Roll the master one! Roll it now, Milo! See what will happen!" Yveli ordered. "No!" The stranger sprawled forward on his knees, his arms reaching out in a vain attempt to gather his property. "Does it work both ways, then?" Milo did not expect an answer, but because he was impressed by Yveli's order and was willing at this moment to believe that perhaps magic was at work here, he spun the proper cube. The result was startling. That man, cursing now in his futility, wavered. Table, papers strewn across the floor, they and their owner were gone. Around the party the whole room began to spin, until they caught at one another dizzily. There came a rushing of wind, a chill of freezing air. Once more they stood in a stone-walled room. Above them there was no longer any ceiling, for that wall ended in the jagged line of ruin. And they were alone. "He is gone, and I believe I can swear by the high altai of Ashtra he cannot return," Divine announced. "But we are here," Yveli said slowly. Milo looked straightly at her. "Perhaps he was right, and for us there is no return. Still, there is much strange knowledge in this land that may aid us if we are fortunate. We have this." He tossed the master cube in his hand and cocked it. "Who knows what we can learn concerning it?" "Well spoken," Divine agreed, "and we are free of the gears also." It was true. Tug Milo did not realize it. That faint uneasiness bomb of the gears no longer rode him. Nail cleared his throat. "We can now go our own ways, with no reason to bow to any other's wish." He hesitated, and Yveli said, "Is that what you wish, Berserker? That we should now part and each seek his own fortune?" Nail rubbed his chin with one hand, then he answered slowly. "A man usually chooses his battle mates and shield companions. However, now I say this. If you wish, Nail Fangtooth, yes, even the skeleted one there, to march your road, say so. I am free of all other vows." "I agree," Weimar shifted the bagged harp to an easier position on his shoulder. Let us not be hasty in splitting our force. It has been proven we can act together well when the need arises. Ingrig and the cleric nod. Last of all, Gult, looking from one face to the next, croaked. Gult walks to your road, if you wish. So be it, Iveli said briskly. But where do we now go, and for what purpose? From this foray we have gained little save, perhaps the confounding of this player of games. We have this, Milo tossed the die. His problem had been solved. He knew now that it was Milo Yegon, and in that he took a certain amount of satisfaction. Shall we roll to see what we can learn? We are wed to that. The bracelets will not loosen. Ingrig had been pulling at his to no purpose. Therefore, comrades of the road, take care of those same dice. But as you ask, swordsmen, I now say, roll to see what comes of it. One chance is as good as another. Milo cupped the die tightly in his hand for a moment and went down to one knee. Then, wondering what might follow, he tossed the referee's control out on the rock floor of the ruined keep. End of Quag Keep. And that's is all. It's a bit late, it's 7 o'clock in Italy, so I have to go to have dinner. I have to go to make and have dinner. So, to the next time, Friday we begin to read another thing, a game book, a series of game book with the Grey Oak setting inside, written by Gary Gygax himself. Then, Friday we begin the game books, but for today is all. Have a nice evening, have a nice dinner, have a nice day. Bye, and to the next time. See ya! No, I Carpato.